If you're new here, welcome. This is Last Story Tonight. Hit subscribe and leave a like. It lets us know you're enjoying these stories and helps us make more for you. Let's begin. There comes a time when you start to think the road ahead will finally stay level. Bills are paid, the car starts on cold mornings, and the person across the table knows how you take your coffee. That's the comfort of routine and its quiet danger. Because the moment you start believing things will stay steady, life usually finds a way to prove you wrong. I'm Clara, 33, journalist for a small Portland paper that still prints on real newsprint. My days are filled with local stories, small town fundraisers, retirees, opening secondhand bookstores, the occasional city zoning dispute. It's decent work, steady work, the kind that keeps you busy but rarely keeps you up at night. At home, I live with Mason, an engineer who's as reliable as the morning bus schedule. We've shared an apartment for almost 4 years. He's calm, organized, and kind in the way of someone who believes in logic more than surprises. Our life runs smoothly. Coffee at 7, dinner around 6, 2 shows before bed. There's nothing wrong with it, and yet sometimes I feel like we're living in parentheses. Everything that matters is outside them. That Monday began like hundreds before. Light rain blurred the street. Mason muttered at his code, and I left with a travel mug that leaked at the seam. By 9, I was at the newsroom, surrounded by the familiar smell of burnt coffee and old carpet. My editor, Carrie, waved me in. "You free this afternoon?" she asked, sliding a sheet of paper toward me. Local veteran photographer. Did tours in the Middle East, now shooting a documentary project. Portraits of soldiers and families, grant funded, might make a solid Sunday piece. I glanced at the name and stopped breathing for half a second. Noah Hale. I hadn't seen him since college. He'd been 2 years older, studying photography, always half sunburned from being outside with a camera. We dated just long enough for me to believe it meant something, and then I ended it like pulling a ripcord. No warning, no explanation. I told myself it was because of grad school applications and deadlines. Truth was, he scared me. Or maybe what I felt for him did. "Sure," I told Carrie, keeping my face neutral. "I'll set it up." Back at my desk, I opened my laptop and searched his name. He'd done well. Small gallery shows, grants, interviews with niche art magazines. His work had changed, less technical, more human. There was a photo of a man's hand with a faded wedding ring mark, another of a woman standing beside an empty chair. Nothing flashy, but every shot made you pause. He always knew how to find the thing most people try to hide. By noon, I'd set the interview for 2 o'clock at his studio off Martin Luther King Boulevard. The rest of the day moved in half focus. Mason texted a picture of a stray cat curled in a toolbox at his shop. New intern. I sent back a smiley face and heart like any long-term partner would. We were fine, or good enough to look that way. I ate lunch at a food cart by the river, grilled cheese and tomato soup, watching an older man fix his fishing line on the dock. He looked calm, patient, like he'd seen everything and stopped expecting life to surprise him. I wondered when that happens, when surprise turns into something you brace for instead of chase. At 1:30, I packed my bag, checked the recorder twice, and walked toward Noah's studio. Portland was damp and gray, the kind of weather that smells like wet cedar. The street near his place had a tire shop, a thrift store, and a mural of a heron someone had painted years ago. I stood under the awning, brushing water off my coat, trying not to overthink the moment. I was here as a reporter, nothing more. Still, as I reached for the door handle, I remembered the last time I'd seen him, standing in the college parking lot with his old Nikon slung around his neck, saying, "If you need space, take it." He said it softly, without anger. That softness stayed with me longer than anything else. Now, more than 10 years later, I was about to walk through his door again. For a story, I told myself. For work. But deep down, I already knew better. The next afternoon came fast, though it felt like I'd been thinking about it all week. Rain again, thin and steady, the kind that never quite stops. Portland has a way of turning weather into background noise, like guilt, always there, easy to ignore if you keep moving. I parked near Noah's studio, a narrow brick building wedged between an auto shop and a shuttered cafe. Through the front window, I could see framed photographs lining the wall, faces, landscapes, shadows. He'd always been drawn to the in-between, this space where something just ended or was about to begin. He opened the door before I could knock. "Clara," he said, and my name sounded strange, like a word you remember but haven't used in years. He looked older, obviously, a few lines around the eyes, his beard starting to gray, but his posture hadn't changed. Calm, deliberate, like he still trusted silence to do most of the work. He wore a dark shirt, sleeves rolled, camera strap hanging off his shoulder. "Come in," he said. "You look exactly the same." That wasn't true, and we both knew it. I smiled anyway. "You don't." He laughed quietly, the same low sound I remembered from college nights when the vending machine would eat his dollar. For a second, everything around us felt like it had slipped back to a familiar version of the past, and I had to remind myself to press record. The studio was simple: concrete floor, desk cluttered with memory cards and film canisters, a small coffee pot steaming in the corner, prints hung from wires clipped like laundry, all black and white. He poured me a cup without asking how I took it. "Still 2 sugars, still too sweet." We started the interview. He spoke clearly, without the detachment some artists use to sound deep. "I wanted to show what happens after people come home," he said. "Everyone talks about war like it ends when the flight lands. It doesn't. The story keeps going, just quieter." He showed me a photo of a man sitting on a porch with a dog's leash in his hand. No dog in sight. Another of a woman holding a folded flag, her eyes on something outside the frame. The images weren't polished, they were raw, patient, almost uncomfortable. "Do you ever feel like you're taking something from them?" I asked. He thought for a moment. "Only when I stop listening." I didn't realize until later how that line would stick with me, how it would echo in places it shouldn't. We talked for nearly 2 hours, longer than I'd planned. When my recorder clicked off, I expected him to show me the door. Instead, he poured another cup of coffee and asked about my work, my life. "It's fine," I said. "Normal. I write, I edit, I try to keep up with deadlines." He smiled. "You always wanted more than normal." The air tightened a little. I tried to deflect. "I guess I got practical." He leaned back against the table. "You used to say you'd rather feel too much than nothing at all." I didn't know how to answer that. I hadn't thought about that version of myself in years. When I finally stood to leave, he walked me to the door. "I'm doing a gallery show next week," he said. "You should come." "No interviews, just come by." I nodded, pretending to hesitate. "Maybe." Outside, the rain had slowed. The air smelled like oil and wet pavement. I stood by my car longer than I needed to, scrolling through photos on my phone just to have something to look at. Mason had texted, "Running late, don't wait up for dinner." I drove home through quiet streets, headlights bouncing off puddles. When I opened the apartment door, Mason was already on the couch, laptop balanced on his knees, face lit by the blue glow of code. He looked up once, smiled briefly, then went back to typing. "Good interview?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Interesting guy." "That's good." He didn't ask more. I didn't offer. Later, in bed, I stared at the ceiling and replayed the afternoon, the way Noah's voice slowed when he spoke about people who wait, about what distance does to love. His hand had brushed mine once, just passing a photo, and I'd felt something small but sharp, like static. It was nothing, just old recognition. Memory. At least, that's what I told myself as Mason's steady breathing filled the room, and I lay awake, wondering when nothing started to feel like a lie. 2 days later, early evening, I told myself I needed follow-ups for the article, quotes about funding, release dates, venue details. It was true enough to dial his number without feeling obvious. Noah picked up on the second ring, voice steady. We set a time for the next morning at a cafe near the river. I added it to my calendar with a bland title, Doc Project. Notes: the cafe was dim and warm, all brick and steam. He chose a corner table away from the door. We talked like professionals for a while, release forms, model rights, the gallery's insurance policy. Then the conversation drifted. He asked how I handle writing about people who don't want to be written about. I said I try to leave them with their dignity. He nodded like it was a rule he knew by heart. When the rush died down, he pulled a small print from a folder, slid it across the table. Found this when I was sorting, he said. It was me. College parking lot, rain beating on my jacket, hair stuck to my cheek. My eyes were lifted towards something just out of frame. I remembered the day, a fight with a professor about an internship, the decision to end things with Noah, the feeling that I had to move quickly or I'd lose my nerve. I'd never seen the photograph. You kept it, I said. I keep a lot of things, he answered, not bragging, not apologizing. The photo landed heavier than it looked. I tucked it back into the folder, palms a little damp. We moved on to scheduling, but my questions started to sound like placeholders. When we stood to leave, his hand grazed my wrist. Brief, incidental, enough to trip a wire I'd forgotten about. That night at home, Mason was assembling a flat-pack shelf in the living room, measuring twice like always. I brought him a beer. He smiled and tapped the bottle to mine. We debated where the shelf should go, then left it leaning against the wall because dinner took priority. After he fell asleep on the couch, I went to the hall closet to look for a blanket. The top shelf held a small gift bag tucked behind a stack of board games. I pulled it down without thinking. Inside, a ring box. Simple, square, navy. I opened it. A modest diamond on a plain band. Not flashy, not cheap. Something chosen by a person who calculates, then chooses. I put it back exactly how I found it. The apartment felt suddenly smaller, like the walls had inched forward while I was staring at the box. I brushed my teeth, listened to the steady tick of the kitchen clock, and told myself I was tired. In bed, Mason shifted toward me, arm heavy across my waist. I held still until his breathing evened. The next afternoon, I arranged another work session with Noah, studio this time, since I needed environment details. He walked me through lighting setups, the taped floor marks, the stool where subjects sat. We spoke about distance, ethics, what it costs to ask someone to relive what they'd rather not revisit. His answers were thoughtful, direct. Somewhere between his sentences, I stopped pretending I was there only for copy. He showed me a new series, families shot in doorways, one person inside, one on the porch. He said door frames tell the truth, who steps forward, who hangs back. I thought about our apartment, about how often Mason meets me at the door, how often I text here from the curb and wait for him to buzz me in. Before I left, Noah said the gallery had added a small panel talk. If you're around, he added. I said I would try. On my way home, I drove a longer route. The ring box sat in my mind like a checkpoint. I knew what the right response should be. Talk to Mason, be honest, decide like adults. Instead, I turned the radio up and recited potential interview questions out loud, as if saying them could block out the rest. That night, Mason cooked pasta and asked about my day. I said it was productive. He told me his brother might visit next month. We loaded the dishwasher side by side, our shoulders almost touching, and the space between us felt measured, like a lane line you're not supposed to cross. I went to bed early, lay awake, and realized something I didn't want to admit. I had started making room for a choice I wasn't ready to name. The following Friday, evening light thinning into drizzle, Noah texted, "Show opens at 7. If you're still curious, come by." I read it twice, thumb hovering over reply. Mason was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, stirring sauce. He looked up briefly. "Late night? Maybe," I said. "Work thing." The gallery was tucked between a bookstore and a tattoo parlor, a narrow space with brick walls and the faint smell of varnish. People milled around with paper cups of cheap wine. I saw Noah near the back, talking to a couple of veterans, one with a prosthetic arm, another with a guide dog. He saw me and nodded once. Acknowledgement, not surprise. The series was called Those Who Stay. Dozens of portraits lined the walls, women by empty beds, men holding folded clothes, kids staring at mailboxes. The theme was clear before anyone explained it. Absence that never quite ends. Then I stopped at one photograph and couldn't move. A couple stood side by side, hands intertwined, but faces turned in opposite directions. The lighting made their shoulders glow faintly against the dark. It wasn't romantic, it was restless. The placard below read, "The ones who love and lie." I felt Noah step beside me. "That one bothers people," he said quietly. "Who did you mean?" He didn't look away from the photo. "Everyone who pretends they're fine." The room felt louder suddenly, shoes on wood, whispers, camera shutters, but his words landed clean. After the crowd thinned, he asked if I wanted to see the view from the roof. It sounded harmless enough. We climbed a narrow stairwell to the top. Portland stretched below, wet streets, neon reflections, traffic lights blinking like small signals that meant nothing. He leaned on the railing, camera dangling at his side. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't left?" I almost laughed. "You'd have hated me eventually. I was 21 and full of drama." He shook his head. "You were alive. That's different." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air smelled of rain and metal. He turned toward me, close enough that I could see a small scar near his eyebrow, one I didn't remember. His hand brushed my arm, then stayed there. It wasn't a question. The kiss came fast, clumsy, not sweet. It wasn't about affection. It was about something unresolved breaking loose. His hand on the back of my neck, mine gripping his jacket. Years of pretending not to think about each other collapsed into that one hard second. When it ended, I stepped back first. My pulse was too loud in my ears. "I should go," I said. He nodded once. "I know." The rain had started again when I reached my car. I sat there for a long time, windshield fogging, trying to decide if what happened mattered yet. It did, but not in a way I could explain. I drove home slowly. Mason was asleep on the couch, TV murmuring about baseball highlights. I stood by the door, watching him breathe, wondering what counted as betrayal, the act itself, or the moment you stop caring that it's possible. I showered, changed into a t-shirt, and lay beside him. His arm found me automatically in his sleep, familiar, heavy, safe. I didn't move. I stared into the dark and thought about the photograph of the couple in the gallery, their hands together, their eyes turned away, and how maybe that was what love really looked like when the truth finally ran out of room. The next Wednesday started like any other. Gray light, quiet kitchen, Mason humming under his breath while packing his laptop. He kissed my forehead, said he'd be late. I nodded, pretending to scroll through emails. As soon as the door closed, I deleted our last conversation thread so I wouldn't have to see Noah's name staring back at me. Then I opened Instagram and saw a new post, one of his photos from the show, the couple with joined hands. The caption read, "Sometimes honesty ruins what comfort builds." I stared at it until the phone dimmed. Around noon, he called. "Are you free this afternoon?" There was no reason to say yes. I had 2 drafts waiting, invoices overdue, a laundry basket half full. But the word left my mouth before logic caught up. We met outside the city, a roadside motel that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 90s. Faded sign, vending machine, humming by the door, a long row of identical rooms. He'd already checked in. When he opened the door, the curtains were drawn, and the air smelled faintly of cheap detergent and rain. No one said anything. He reached for me like he already knew the answer. It wasn't romantic, not even gentle. It felt like something that had been waiting too long, built from old hunger and unfinished sentences. The sound of rain through the thin window screen was the only rhythm that made sense. When it was over, neither of us moved for a while. I looked at the water stain spreading across the ceiling. He traced a line down my arm with his finger, stopped halfway. "I can't do this again," he said quietly. "I know." He sat up, rubbing his face. "You have a life." "I don't want to break it." I almost laughed. "And it's already cracked." He didn't answer. After a few minutes, he pulled on his shirt, grabbed his camera bag, and left. The click of the door was soft but final. I stayed on the bed, sheet tangled around my legs, watching the light shift through the curtains. I thought I'd feel something, guilt, relief, anything, but mostly it was a clean, hollow space, like a house after furniture's been moved out. When I finally drove home, the rain had stopped. The apartment smelled like garlic, and detergent. Mason was at the table, typing on his laptop. He looked up, smiled faintly. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "You're acting strange." "Where were you?" I hesitated. My throat tightened in a way that wasn't about lying. It was about what honesty would do if I let it out. I shrugged. "Just out. Needed air." He studied me, eyes narrowing just slightly, then nodded. "All right." He went back to typing. The sound of keys filled the room. I stood by the counter, still holding my purse, feeling like I'd walked into a life that no longer fit right. That night, we ate leftovers in silence. Mason asked about my article. I gave short answers. He didn't push. After dinner, he washed the dishes, humming the same tune he always did when he was trying not to think too hard. Later, when I turned off the light, he lay beside me but didn't reach out. His breathing stayed steady, controlled, almost rehearsed. I could feel the distance between us like a draft under a door. I wanted to confess, to unload the weight before it sank any deeper, but the words wouldn't come, not out of fear, more because I knew they wouldn't change anything. He already sensed it, maybe not the details, but the shift, the way my attention had moved elsewhere. And that was the part that hurt most. He didn't fight it. He didn't ask who or why. He just rolled over, pulled the blanket higher, and let the silence between us finish what I'd started somewhere else. The following week, Mason started packing in quiet pieces. At first it looked like cleaning. Shirts off hangers, drawers straightened, cables coiled neatly. Then I saw the empty side of the closet and realized it wasn't cleaning at all. He didn't yell or accuse. He just said, "I'll stay with my brother for a while," and kept folding. His tone was calm, polite, even kind. That hurt worse than anger ever could. I wanted to speak, to explain, but everything sounded false before it reached my mouth. "It wasn't," I started, but he shook his head gently. "I don't need the story," he said. "I already know how it ends." When the door closed behind him, the apartment made new noises I'd never noticed. Pipes ticking, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint buzz of streetlights through the window. I sat on the couch and watched the clock for an hour without moving. The next morning I tried to work. The recorder on my desk still held Noah's voice from our last interview, the steady rhythm of his speech about what people carry home. I pressed play, lasted 20 seconds, and turned it off. A few days later, I saw Noah again at a small exhibit opening near downtown. He looked tired, thinner. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We stood near a wall of new photos, dark, minimal compositions. The series was called Disappearance. "That's recent?" I asked. "Started it last month," he said. "Couldn't sleep. Figured I'd do something with it." The photos showed reflections, shadows, people half turned away. Then on the third frame, I saw myself, or a version of me, a blurred figure in a window's reflection, rain streaking the glass. The caption read simply, "What remains?" "You used me," I said. He didn't flinch. "You were already gone." I didn't argue. It wasn't cruelty, not really, just a fact, stated out loud. We walked outside, the cold air biting after the warmth of the gallery. He leaned against the wall, rubbing his palms together. "Clara, this, whatever it was, it doesn't lead anywhere good." "I wasn't asking for anywhere," I said. "I just didn't want to feel like nothing anymore." He looked at me for a long time, jaw tight. "You're not nothing. You just forgot who you were when you stopped asking for more." For the first time, I noticed the small tremor in his hand when he lit a cigarette. He never used to smoke. Maybe that was his way of filling space too. We didn't say goodbye. I walked to my car, turned the radio on, then off again. The drive home was short, but felt endless. Each traffic light, a small reminder that I could still stop, still turn around. I didn't. At the apartment, the ring box was gone from the closet. So were his coats, his toolbox, the mug he always used for coffee. I opened the fridge, half empty. His side of the bed, untouched since morning. That night I drank tea and listened to an old voicemail of my own, something from a few weeks earlier. My voice cheerful, rushing through plans. It didn't sound like me anymore. I started recording a voice memo, something for myself. "No," I said quietly. "Mason left." Noah's avoiding me. I think this is what happens when you stop pretending you're the good one. Then I deleted it before it could save. The next morning, the newsroom was busy again. Phones ringing, printers humming, the same world carrying on without pause. I handed in a piece about a local artist fundraiser, rewrote 3 captions, checked spelling twice. When Carrie stopped by my desk and asked, "Everything all right?" I smiled. "Yeah, just tired." She nodded, satisfied, and moved on. I looked out the window toward the river. The clouds were breaking, sunlight threading through in thin strips. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel anything. Not guilt, not grief. Just the strange calm that comes after something you've been waiting to fall finally hits the ground. 3 months passed. Time stretched and folded in uneven ways. Some days sharp, others blurred. Mason came by one Saturday morning to pick up what was left of his things. He'd texted first, polite as always. When he arrived, he wore a new jacket, a calm expression, the kind you put on before entering a familiar but distant place. I handed him a small box of what I'd found. His tools, a few cables, that old photo from his hiking trip. He thanked me. No anger, no edge, just a man closing a door without slamming it. "I'm not mad anymore," he said quietly. "You don't have to be either." "I'm not sure what I am," I admitted. He nodded, looked around the apartment once more, then said, "I hope you find what you were looking for." He didn't wait for an answer. The door clicked behind him, and the sound lingered longer than it should have. After he left, I opened my laptop, trying to work. The cursor blinked in the middle of a half-finished paragraph about an upcoming city cleanup project. I couldn't concentrate. My mind kept looping back to the mess I'd made. How ordinary it had all looked from the outside, while everything underneath cracked. That evening, a small package arrived. No note, no return address. Inside was a flash drive. I plugged it in before I could overthink it. Photos appeared, dozens of them. Noah's work, faces, streets, shadows, sunlight cutting through blinds. Near the end, a series I hadn't seen before. The river, my profile from behind, and one of me walking away, slightly out of focus. The last file was blank, just a black frame with the title done. I stared at it for a long time. No message, no closure, just a full stop. Noah had moved on. I'd heard through colleagues that he was traveling again, shooting in the Midwest. That should have made it easier. It didn't. The following week, I recorded the final episode of my podcast, something I'd started years ago as a side project about human stories. This time, I turned the microphone on myself. "I used to think betrayal was about someone else," I said into the quiet. "But maybe it's about leaving your own life without realizing it. I didn't just cheat on a person. I cheated on a version of myself I stopped believing in." I paused, listening to the hum of the recorder. People think love ends in one moment. It doesn't. It fades in pieces. Late replies, short dinners, the habit of saying "I'm fine" when you're not. I uploaded the episode, then closed the laptop and went outside. The city was damp from earlier rain, streets reflecting pale orange light from storefronts. I walked down to the river where I'd first interviewed Noah months ago. The air was sharp, the kind that wakes you up. A jogger passed, a couple argued softly near the railing, a dog barked somewhere down the path. Life going on, uninterested in my version of it. I stood there, watching the water move, not dramatic, not cleansing, just constant. For the first time in a while, that felt enough. I took out my phone, opened a new voice memo, and spoke without planning. I think we spend years trying to build something that looks like peace, but real peace might just be living with what we broke and not needing to fix it. Maybe that's the point. Learning to stay when there's no story left to tell. I saved it. No edits, no title, just recording 47. Then I walked home as the streetlights came on one by one, the air cooling against my skin. Somewhere behind me, the river kept moving, steady, indifferent, honest, and for once, I didn't look back.